Previously on Slay. Lincoln visited Gabriella Radu at her home after Teddy ransomed her to her father. The little girl had been through hell and may never fully recover, but she brought with her a clue to Teddy's whereabouts. A clue planted in her mind by Delilah Droman. And that clue? A name. Finicus Sleidan, a darkmesh creator in Trenton, New Jersey, who is possibly the maker of dreamgaunts that Teddy uses on defenseless, enlightened children in his hidden nightmare factory. Meanwhile, Delilah is beginning to break down. To stay alive and strive for a rescue, she's used her new aptitude for dream manipulation to magnify the nightmares of Teddy's captives. How much longer can Delilah keep this up? Find out next on Slay, episode 66. Someone knocked against the door 5 times. Knock, 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 knock. A simple enough code to sort out the riffraff and panhandlers from the people that mattered. The few people who knew who he was, who knew the special things he could do. Finicus Sleidan walked to the door. His place had once been an Exxon gas station. Exxon had bailed, as had many businesses in the Central West neighborhood. Finicus had snatched up the property for a song. Gas pumps had been removed, but the old canopy was still out front, rusted, with some tar paper tiles hanging down like listless black and red tongues. The old service bay garage doors remained. Graffiti covered them. Same graffiti for 7 years now. People in the neighborhood had learned the hard way that anyone who defaced, desecrated, or damaged the old gas station wound up dead a few days later. They usually choked on their tongues in their sleep. Sometimes, though, they were shot. It all depended on what resources Finicus had at his disposal. The door was the clear glass it had been when attendants had walked out of it to pump gas, except Finicus had replaced that with glass that was a two-way mirror. He could see outside, while those outside could only see a reflection of themselves. He'd meshed up the glass, making it bulletproof, mesh-proof, all the proofs a lowly craftsman in a dangerous neighborhood could want. Standing outside the door was a fat man wearing a blue Amazon delivery vest. He held the black cardboard box in both hands. The box did not have the Amazon logo on it. The man was alone. Finicus opened the door. He kept his place very cold. The open door let cool air flow out as warmer air flowed in. "Delivery for you, Mr. Sleidan," the man said. Finicus could barely contain his excitement. He took the box. "Thank you, Mortimer," he said. "Just the one? I'm expecting several." "That's all that came in today. I rushed it right here." He glanced over his left shoulder, then his right. I don't really like this neighborhood, Mr. Sleidan." Finicus set the box on a rack just inside the door. That rack had once contained Twinkies, King Dons, and other treats. He dug into his pants pocket, pulled out a gold coin, and handed it to Mortimer. "Thank you," Mortimer said. "As soon as your other packages come in, I'll bring them out." With that, he hurried to his gray Amazon van parked under the canopy. Finicus shut the door and carried his box to what had once been the service bay. The bay was his workshop now, full of wonderful things. Saltwater fish tanks held dozens of Alpsilia vicaria. mesh bins that kept infant Antilles in suspended animation, an old tire rack that now held long strips of rattan, and his finished baskets. He took great pride in the baskets. For a premium product, you needed premium packaging, and his baskets were the best. Finicus set the box down on his table, whistling the melody of Doja Cat's Paint the Town Red. This shipment had come all the way from the Ukraine. It was so hard to find good materials these days. War zones were often the best. He used an X-Acto knife to carefully slice open the cardboard lid. Inside, white styrofoam. A box within a box. Very nice. They had shipped it correctly. He lifted the styrofoam lid. Curls of cold mist wafted up. How delightful. Inside the styrofoam box, lined up neatly on a towel folded atop bags of dry ice, were 100 severed human fingers, base knuckle included. Finicus had orders to fill because business was good. Knock, 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 knock. Mortimer again? Too soon for him to have another delivery. Poor timing, but the fingers weren't going anywhere. Finicus walked into the station area. There stood Fat Mortimer at the door. His eyes were wide, a rather strange, strained, apologetic smile on his face. Did he have information on the next shipment, or did he simply have to pee? Finicus opened the door. Mortimer, I hope that you... A tall man slid into view on Mortimer's right. A man wearing gray armor, mostly covered by a gray hood and a ragged cloak. Slowly roiling mist hit his eyes, extending outward like gossamer deer horns. Extending outward like gossamer demon horns. A Rixator. The compact, black firearm the man had undoubtedly been pointing at Mortimer now aimed right at Finicus's nose. Hello, fuckface, he said. You gonna invite me in? Finicus could see the Rixator's overlay. Boots, jeans, a ratty Lumensia leopard's jacket that looked like it belonged on an indigent man who'd slept in doorways for months on end. This was not good. Not good at all. If you'd like a third eye that just so happens to be the size of a 12-gauge slug coated in no-heel mesh, keep on standing there like a moron, the Rixator said. I am more than happy to ventilate your thinky bits right here where all the homeless bums in the neighborhood can watch. Finicus stepped back, held the door open. The Rixator shoved Mortimer inside, knocking Mortimer to the floor, then stepped in himself. A young man followed him in and closed the door. The young man was just as tall as the Rixator. He wore black jeans, a thick dark gray flannel shirt, sunglasses, and a black knit cap. Clearly, this one was not a Rixator. The young man reached into his jacket, drew a wicked-looking pistol, and aimed it at Mortimer. Dude, Mortimer said, holding up a hand as if that would ward off a bullet. I'm just a delivery guy, swear to God. The young man put a finger to his lips. Hush now. I believe you gentlemen have made a mistake, Finicus said, finding his voice at last. Whatever it is you want, there is no need for violence. The Rixator took a step closer. Open your mouth, he said. A statement that made Finicus close his mouth tight, lips pressed together. Open your mouth, the Rixator said again. If you don't, I will knock your teeth out." Finicus glanced at the young man. If I were you, I would do as I was told, the young man said. "Yeah, but maybe you don't like your teeth. I don't know." This was most unfortunate. Finicus worked to control his fear. His security measures were designed to keep people out and to quietly eliminate anyone who tried the breaking and entering route. He had let these men in through the front door. He didn't have many measures to protect against that. For the few measures he could still use, few of them would work against a Rixator. Finicus opened his mouth. The Rixator raised the stubby shotgun, pressed the weapon's flat face against Finicus's lips. "Stick your tongue out," the Rixator said. "Right down the barrel. Swish it around in there." Was this Rixator insane? Was he going to shoot anyway? Finicus extended his tongue into the weapon's wide barrel. The tang of metal. And something else. A sulfurous, bitter flavor. "Well done," the Rixator said. "I wanted you to know what death tastes like." He lowered the gun, leaned in close. The haze hiding his eyes wriggled and roiled like a living thing. "Teddy Two Fingers is a customer of yours," the Rixator said. "Where can I find him?" Finicus's fear magnified, rushed through his chest and his stomach. "I don't have a customer by that name," he said. "Bullshit," the young man said. "Tell the truth, stupid fuck. My man here is not in a playful mood." That Finicus already knew. Tongue-fucking a shotgun had brought that lesson home quickly. "I swear it. I don't sell to that man. I have heard of him, of course, but he's no customer of mine. I just make gaunts." God damn it. Had he just admitted that to a Rixator? "For therapeutic purposes," Finicus said. "Eastern medicine, you understand." Would they buy that? The Rixator leaned closer. He sniffed deeply. Finicus thought he could hear the mist mask. It sounded like sizzling flesh. The Rixator leaned back, his lips twisted into a sneer, 2 days stubble on his jaw. "Fuckface is telling the truth," he said. "So you just make gaunts? Show me where. Right now. Kid, bring Mr. Not His Lucky Day. If he gives you any trouble, shoot him in the foot." The Rixator grabbed Finicus, shoved him, sent him stumbling toward the only other door in the room. Mortimer covered his feet with his hands, then seemed to think the better of it. He and his jowls shook in fear. Finicus knew he was in a lot of trouble. He needed to stay calm, talk his way out of this. Would the Rixator listen to reason? "I can see why you're upset," Finicus said as he walked into the service area. "You think I would sell to that monster. Of course, a Rixator such as yourself would want to track Two Fingers down. You know, I've done work for the Bastion before. I could stitch up that cloak of yours, make it almost as good as new." Another shove. Finicus bumped against the table that held the box. The Rixator closed in, his tattered cape sweeping along behind him. "That's former Rixator, fuckface. You know who I am now?" Realization hit Finicus like a hammer to the gut. Former Rixator. The tattered cloak. the haze covering his eyes. It was the bounty hunter, the axe murderer, the unforgiving, unkillable slayer. "Oh God," Finicus said, "you're the man in gray." The tall former Rixator smiled. "Oh, hey, man in gray," the young man said. "What's in the box?" "Damn, I've always wanted to say that for real. You know the movie, Seven? That scene with Brad Pitt and Morgan Freeman? Out in the desert. There were these power lines, right? And Pitt is all, 'What's in the box?' And Morgan won't tell him, but he don't have to, because he says it all with his eyes. And Kevin Spacey has this shit-eating grin on his face. And shit-eating is an interesting phrase for him, considering how," the man in gray lifted a hand. The young man stopped talking. "Ah, sorry," the young man said. "But seriously, though, what's in the box?" The man in gray reached out, tilted the box, looked inside. "Well, well, well," he said. "Severed fingers. I'll take a wild guess you have baby monkeys on ice, and the fish tanks I see there hold giant black sea slugs. Yeah?" Finicus forced a smile. "I just make gaunts." The man in gray turned, looked down at Mortimer. "If I let you go, you never saw any of this," the axe killer said. "Right?" Mortimer nodded so violently his fat cheeks wobbled. "That's right. I didn't see jack shit." The man in gray tilted his head toward the door. "Take a hike," he said. "Don't give me reason to come and find you, because I will find you." The young man pulled Mortimer to his feet, pushed him out the door. The man in gray turned back to Finicus. "Put your hand on the table, fuckface. Spread your fingers, nice and wide." Finicus looked at the table, then back into the roiling mist. He shook his head. The man in gray slid his shotgun into his cloak. When his hand came out again, it held a rune-covered hatchet. "Hand on the table or your balls in the garbage can. Your choice." Finicus put his hand on the table. He spread his fingers out wide, as he has been told. "Now," the man in gray said, "who buys your product?" Oh, that was all he wanted? What a relief. "Not a who, a what," Finicus said. "A company, Kaku Incorporated, CACOOO. I'm afraid I don't have an address for you. When I finish 16 units, they send a giant flying centipede to pick them up. They deposit funds in my Cayman Islands account." The man in gray rested the hilt of his hatchet on the table, very close to Finicus's pinky. "And now you're going to tell me you got no idea where that centipede goes?" "No idea whatsoever," Finicus said. "It is a simple arrangement. As I told you, I just make gaunts." "Man, he's got to know more," the young man said. "He's got to. We need to find her." Finicus didn't know who "her" was, but the young man seemed quite agitated. "I am sure you will find her," Finicus said, "but I have told you all I know. You see, man in gray, I am happy to comply. You didn't need to threaten to cut off my fingers." The haze mask churned and wavered. Oh, I wasn't threatening that to get you to talk," he said. "Your fingers were fucked no matter what you told me." Finicus had a brief moment of blank thought as his brain tried to process what he had heard, what he couldn't have heard. Then the rune-etched hatchet came up and went down with blinding speed. Blood spurted across the tabletop. Finicus stared in shock, feeling the pain but not fully registering it. his palm still flat on the table. The man in gray scooped up Finicus's 4 severed fingers and tossed them into the styrofoam box. "Now you can just make something else," the man in gray said. "Someone from the Bastion will be here soon, fuckface. If you're not here when they arrive, I will find you. I will cut off the rest of your fingers and shove them straight up your ass. Kid, let's go home." They walked out of the service bay. Finicus didn't move. For a good minute or two, before the pain really registered, he watched blood flow from the stumps of his fingers across the tabletop until it dripped down onto the concrete floor. Sometimes they let her rest. Alone in her cell, Delilah sat cross-legged on her cot. Her cell was like all the others, except hers had a glossy poster on the wall. A much younger Teddy Two Fingers, with all of his fingers, on a stage, rocking out with a guitar covered in long, tawny fake fur. Matching fur covered the headstock. The words Teddy Bear Trevino done up as an angular logo across the top. The logo reminded Delilah of that band Def Leppard. Her dad liked them. The poster was Teddy's gift to Delilah to put some color in her room. As exhausted as Delilah was, she fought against sleep. Because when she slept, she dreamed. She dreamed the dreams of others. She dreamed of emerald spiders, of glistening fangs sinking deep into her father's chest. She dreamed of drowning dogs biting her, dragging her down to the depths where her blood magic couldn't save her, where she ran out of air before she could form the most basic, life-saving mesh. She dreamed of turning into a tiger, which was good, but then being hunted by men in safari hats, being shot, tangled in nets and raised into the air, powerless and paralyzed, then being stabbed to death by sharp spears. She dreamed of her wind magic spiraling out of control, ripping wallpaper from the walls, becoming a tornado that tore the flesh from her mother's face. She dreamed of a classroom of mean kids laughing at her because she had a boner, because she had wet herself. So, Delilah stayed awake. In her cell, night after night, she stayed awake. She used bits of her own internal mesh, a method taught to her by Morgan Stone, to help stay alert for all-night study sessions and exams. Morgan. Delilah had been such an asshole to her. Why? Because Morgan wasn't her mother? Because Dad liked Morgan as more than just an acolyte? Morgan wasn't the problem. Delilah was. Delilah missed Morgan. Maybe, if she ever got out of here, she'd apologize to Morgan. Maybe Delilah would try to be a better person. But that would never happen. Because she was bad. She was rotten. All the way down and all the way up. Delilah was the head chef in a kitchen of nightmares. She stirred the dreams of others, made them worse. She amplified them. Day after day, night after night, she tortured children just like her. Had Gabriella delivered the message to Lincoln? Could Lincoln and Walt decipher it? And did it really matter? Delilah knew she was going to die down here. She deserved to die. In the dead silence of her stone cell, where she could hear her own breathing, Delilah detected the faintest of sounds. So light, so small. In the far corner, a cockroach crawled along a crack in the wall. She could hear its minuscule little footsteps. Was that a real bug or one of Haimana's little spies? A roach. Delilah had heard they could survive almost anything. Supposedly, after a nuclear war, roaches would thrive while people died away. Roaches. They were survivors. Delilah didn't want to die. As much as she deserved death, she didn't want it. In that moment, a switch flipped in her mind. She knew several things with absolute certainty. Lincoln Franks wasn't coming for her. Her father, for sure, wasn't coming for her. Neither was Morgan Stone. No one was coming. If Delilah wanted to be like the roach, if she wanted to survive, if she wanted the other kids that she tortured to survive, there was only one way. They needed to fight. In the silence of her stone cell, Delilah Droman closed her eyes. She slipped into the dream realm. She conjured her cell phone and started swiping through the tangled nightmares of 31 children. They sat at the kitchen table, Ariella and Magda with their laptops, Billy with a legal pad, Lincoln sharpening his hatchet. That slow, steady scrape of flint on steel might have disturbed Billy once upon a time, but now he found it comforting. What he did not find comforting, however, was Link's savagery. He had cut off that dude's fingers. Yeah, dreamgaunts were bad. Billy had been told, but did Sleidan deserve that? Maybe. The shithead had 100 severed human fingers in a fucking dry icebox. Oh, make that 104. No website for Cuckoo Corp, Magda said. I've tried everything. Variations on the name, too. All the search engines, even LinkedIn. Total blank. Billy kept writing the name of the company on his pad, over and over again in tiny letters. There was something about that name that bugged him, but he couldn't place it. I have searches going across all international business registries, Ariella said. If it's in there, we will find it soon. 4 glasses on the table, but no alcohol. Frau Munda Fizzo for Billy and Magda, water for Ariella, a glass of milk for Link. No one had said anything about booze. If there had been any booze left in the house, maybe it would have been different. Link wasn't complaining, but every now and then he'd flash Billy a dirty look over his machetes. But every now and then he'd flash Billy a dirty look over the hatchet's edge. Billy knew what that look meant. His disagreement with Link wasn't over. It was only put up on a shelf until Link was ready to talk about it again. Billy had a feeling he would not enjoy that particular discussion. Hell, his stomach still hurt. Magda's cell phone rang. She answered it, said yeah once, twice, then a no, then an okay, and she hung up. That was Sophia, she said. Soph and Lucas took Sleidan to the Bastion. Sleidan's on his way to the lower level. Inquisitors are going to ask him all kinds of questions about his gaunt making and about Teddy. Link slid his stone across the blade. They won't get anything out of Sleidan, he said. Fuckface doesn't know anything else. I hope he enjoys the process, though. What about the animals? A pair of monks are taking the baby monkeys to a sympathetic contact at the Lumencia Zoo, Magda said. 43 of the little boogers. 2 were dead. What about those slugs? Lincoln asked. They're nasty as hell, but they didn't hurt anything. Magda started typing again, her eyes on the screen. Georgia Aquarium, she said. That's where they're headed. Sea slugs as big as a 4-slice toaster. Baby monkeys so small you could hold 2 in one hand. Finicus Sleidan used darkmesh to fuse fingers and monkey tails to the slug, then morphed the whole thing into a nasty-ass dreamgaunt. There was a bunch of other bits and pieces in there as well, but Billy really didn't want to know anymore. Baby monkeys. Maybe Finicus did deserve to have his fingers chopped off. Basil's still hot for your ass, Magda said. He wants Sophia and Lucas to find you and bring you in. Basil can lick my taint, Lincoln said. Sophster and little brother won't do shit. Lucas might be a turd muffin, but if he ratted me out, Pops would literally kill him to destroy the Frank's DNA that went sour. Billy drew the company name for the 15th time. Then it hit him. CaCOOO, he said. CaCO3. Calcium carbonate. And to think I told my high school teacher I'd never use chemistry in real life. Fucking Teddy literally named his company Shell Company. Lincoln stopped sharpening. What? Calcium carbonate. Shell Company. The fuck are you talking about? Seashells, Ariella said. Calcium carbonate is what shells are made of. Teddy's a clever fuck, that's for sure. Billy fought off despair. What had Delilah gone through to get that message out in Gabriella's mind? What had Gabriella gone through? And all of that work cut off at the knees because, yet again, Teddy was one step ahead, covering his ass with iron plating. Lincoln sniffed, went back to sharpening. Billy thought about the look on Sleidan's face, him staring at his severed fingers. Ariella sat forward. Got a hit. Cuckoo Corp is registered in Malta. Let's see. No listing for the board. No staff of any kind, but yes, it's a shell company. 6 companies under their umbrella. Billy tore off the top page of his legal pad, crumpled it, tossed it over his shoulder. Dragon darted out from under the table, caught the paper in midair. She shook it, growling her tiny, fierce growl. Well, god damn, Ariella said. One of the subsidiaries is a restaurant supply company named Wholesome Stuff. Lincoln set Bastard Maker flat on the table. Are there staff names on that one? Where is it located? Where do they distribute? Ariella held up a finger, silencing him as she read. Wholesome Stuff has a bakery and a warehouse in Texas, she said. Lincoln stood. Then I'm going to Texas. Hold on, Billy said. As slick as Teddy is, he's not going to hide his nightmare factory in plain sight like that. There's more to this. Lincoln picked up his hatchet. I said, I'm going to Texas. Billy knew Link wasn't stupid, but he sure was stubborn. Ariella, Billy said, how many places is this Wholesome Stuff shipped to? She tapped keys. I don't know. Teddy's covered his tracks here, too. Billy's right. We need more info. Link headed for the door. I said, I'm going. Magda slammed her palms on the table so hard that Billy jumped in his seat and the laptops bounced up, then clattered back down. Dragon yipped and scurried out of the kitchen, tail tucked. "Lincoln Franks," Magda said. "Cool your goddamn jets and use your brain for once. If you gotta go to Texas, you'll go to Texas. But give us a goddamn minute to think." Lincoln looked at Magda much the same way he had been looking at Billy. "Billy's right," Magda said. "You going to Texas and beating the shit out of some hourly workers and middle management pricks ain't gonna produce nothing. If you go there and it ain't where Teddy is hiding Delilah and the other kids, what do you think happens?" Link thought for a second, then sighed. "Word gets back to Teddy," he said. "Right. Word gets back to Teddy that we found his connection, and he makes that connection go away. Maybe he makes it go away by killing all the kids and starting over again somewhere else. You know this motherfucker, Link. He'd kill them all in a heartbeat before he goes to the Bastion jail again. Right?" Link's jaw muscles twitched. He looked like he might slash something, anything, at any moment. Billy put his hands behind his back so Link couldn't see his fingers, just in case. "Right," Link said. "Right," Link said. Oop. "Right," Link said. Clearly, it wasn't easy for him to say that. "So give us a couple of hours," Magda said. "That's all I'm asking. A couple of hours." Lincoln held up his hand. "A couple of hours to do what exactly?" Magda looked at Ariella. "You got contacts, Miss Thang," Magda said. "Now that we have a company name, you can make some calls. Maybe get information on which fucking restaurants this company ships to." Ariella glanced at Billy, then at Lincoln. And then, the strangest thing. She smiled at Magda like Magda was her friend. "No business in this world or in Quartus happens without lawyers," Ariella said. "And I know lots of lawyers." Link stepped to the counter. "I'll get you some help in that department," he said. "I'm starving, and I have a sudden hankering for chicken fingers panini. Anybody want some?" That was episode 66 of Slay, and my throat is fried, y'all. Back next week for the next episode. Good night. There we go. Baby girl, come on up whenever you're ready. All right. Taint and turd muffin in the same sentence. Link is a wordsmith. Rob, you are correct. Link is very much a wordsmith. Midwest Waffles, welcome. I'm glad you joined us. You probably have to listen from the beginning. Also, Midwest Waffles, you gave me the gas, so it just happens. Sometimes I feel like it's the gas. There's nothing you can do about it. All right. Scott Aiken says that was disturbing. Richard Bennett, loving it. I am very glad to hear that. I got the... I must have been breathing wrong during that whole operation because a lot of burps come my way, which my beautiful wife will probably be not happy with. But at least they're not toots, ladies and gentlemen. At least they are not toots. So, oh shit, I gotta fix some things. Hold tight. Come on in, baby girl, whenever you're ready. Tell you what, thanks, doll. I don't know how I forget all this stuff. Let's switch to the A cam, which I can't tell where it's at right now. Hold on. Window projector. That's my super cool laugh, by the way. I'm a cool guy. I'm like, fucking Jerry Lewis in the house all of a sudden.
Oh, we didn't even move that.
You just brought my check. I like it. I did,
but I didn't know where to put it.
We do get actual checks in this business. We're still working on our sound issue. Steve, we spent another hour on it today. So we're going to try, we may be playing with the sound as we're going to play the sound as we go, is what I'm trying to say. We've got a different microphone for A, and we're going to play with some of the placement of it. Gosh, everything looks so... that buzz, I don't know where that's coming from.
Yeah, I don't either.
Great. Hold tight, guys. That's on your mic, though.
Oh, why does this keep doing this?
I don't know. This is the extraordinarily professional production that is Empty Set getting ready to do some shit. So let's go. I got to look at your webcam is here.
He's a devil.
Ooh, she's a devil. She's a bad little bitch. She's a rebel. Ooh, she's a devil. That looks great. There we go. And
there is a buzz, though. I hear it. You hear it.
I will work on that buzz.
I didn't touch nothing, you guys. I didn't touch nothing.
You know what? It's such a pain in the ass. We literally didn't have that. We were silently doing this the whole time. We did not have that buzz. So what you're going to do... Oh, by the way, everybody, look who's here.
I want to say, I know she's not watching, but my good friend Amy has a birthday today. So happy birthday to Amy. And yesterday was our niece Sydney's birthday. So happy birthday to
Sugar
her.
Plum, you're going to vamp and do your thing. Respond to the chat room. I need a minute to see if I know what that is. That's a cable overlapping, audio cable overlapping electrical cable. Let's see if I can find it.
Okay, no problem. So I'm going to vamp for...
Holler, okay?
What?
If you hear the buzz go away, just holler.
Okay, I will. He's working on... oh, look at this. I'll just put... Well, I can't even push that in. There's nothing I can do with that. So I'm just going to leave it there. So this is a crazy week. My mother-in-law had a birthday on the 22nd. My niece Sydney had a birthday yesterday. I have a birthday on Friday, and we have an anniversary on Friday. Oh, nope, it's still there. I lied. And there is another one. My friend Amy, who I just mentioned, had a birthday. Has a birthday today. And I also want to send a whole bunch of love to my friend Maria, who has a big family thing going on today and is clearly not watching, but I love her.
So we had the buzz, babe?
We do. There is somebody on YouTube whose name is Midwest Waffles, which I love. Yep. I don't know who that is. And let's see. Yeah. Like I said, Pam, Pam, of course, has known my birthday forever, but if you guys don't know this. Gone?
Yes, your whole mic is disconnected.
Oh.
Just wait till...
Hey, I'm a rebel.
And you're back in. Any luck?
Still a buzz.
Damn.
Not as big.
Well,
maybe here. Maybe it's room tone. Or whatever.
We have to go with it.
All right.
There it goes.
Are there any fans on?
It's, no. It's not a fan issue. It's just a cable crossover.
Cable crossover.
This is the beauty of what we do. We literally spent an hour trying to get her audio dialed in, and we didn't have that buzz. You go live, it's fucking buzz.
Yeah.
Everything's exactly the same.
And the hour was like an hour and a half ago. It was right before show start that we did all that. Ooh. It's on my phone, is it? No, that's not doing anything.
All right, now let's get into the show. Here we go.
Okie doke.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, let's get you the schedule of the stank. That was episode 66, The Fingers. Sunday, June 23rd, Slay episode 65, Gabriella went live in the feed. Sunday, June 30th, tonight's episode goes live in the feed. And Wednesday, July 3rd, Slice's live read is Slay episode 67, Deduction. That'll be live on the road. We'll be in Michigan to see our family. And the Slay audiobook is up at scottsagler.com/slay. There is a link to Audible there, or get it at Audible. If you're just hearing this for the first time, go by... What are you trying to accomplish, babe?
Pam, I think in the chat room on YouTube said it could be related to my computer being too close to a cable, but that's not true.
No, we have that same setup every week.
Yep.
I know what it is. I moved something. So go to scottsagler.com/slay, and I do. Look at this. Boom. Go right there. You should buy the audiobook for Slay. You should read it. You should enjoy it. You should... I'm not going to say touch yourself while you're listening to it because it's just that good.
It's a family show.
And then you should give it a 5-star review and make sure you put in an audio review of it or a text review of it when you do the review, either on Amazon, on Audible, or on both. That would be wonderful. And, we got to show shit. I was way behind today. Way behind. Yeah. So we're going to try and do this. We're going to show them. Let's take a look.
All right. I don't know what we're doing. So.
We're gonna show reviews. We'll do that later because we're already running late. It's 10 to 7.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. It's already 10 to 7.
Yeah. So we do know this. I should have said this sooner. The we're about to start deep cuts, but you should all plan, if you're listening now, that the remaining episodes of Slay are likely to be more than a half an hour long, just like this one was. This one reads long. The next couple will read long. It's supposed to end at 70, which I think it will. So 70 might be a normal length because it'll probably be an epilogue.
It's 71 now.
What?
It's 71 now,
Okay,
yeah.
71. Well, you ruined my whole joke. What I was going to say is 70 might be a normal-sized episode because it'll be the epilogue. But 69 will be very long, was the joke I was going to make to make up for my family show comment.
69 will be very, very long. That is correct.
But 70, it now sounds like, might be very long as well. And 71 is probably going to be about a half an hour.
So we can turn this off. Talk a little bit, babe. Oh, that's interesting. Talk a little bit, babe.
I'm talking, but I can't hear myself.
We got
the headphones. Oh, there it is. There it is. It's a cable.
We're going to leave that on. We're going to leave that on. Don't touch that goddamn cable, too. We got to replace that cable.
We do.
So it's always something. So we're trying to get you a little closer to your mic and talk with a tiny bit more volume and see if we can get rid of that echo.
I'm closer to the mic and talking closer to the mic and trying to be a little bit louder.
Okay.
This afternoon I was trying to project my voice right behind us, right that away is the wall to our condo, and I was trying to project my voice outside it. I also am arguing with my HOA, of which I am a member, and I projected my voice a whole lot last night, so it helped me get in the mood to do that. We had an HOA meeting last night, and I was not a happy camper.
Not a happy camper at all. All right, babe, I'm going to bring you down a notch on the output of one of your unison presets, which means you're probably going to have to get a little bit more volume. Thank you, guys. We're still trying to dial this in.
Okay, I can do more volume if that's what we
Why do you
need.
sound so crazy muted all of a sudden?
It's the stupid cable, I think.
It's very frustrating. This is an extraordinarily frustrating process, you guys. Live sound is a bitch. How about now?
I don't know. What do you think?
There we go.
All right. So let's move on. It's time to do the little start of deep cuts where I do the measuring of the time.
Save this, and I got to do this. God, and of course, I had my dumbass had my phone sound on as well. Talk to people in the chat room while I get this going.
So I'm going to try and project kind of through the wall that's directly in front of us that you guys can't see. Our house is an absolute wreck because we are getting ready soon to travel, as you guys know, to Michigan. It's been a crazy couple of days, but I think things are going well. Let's see what else.
I think we're ready to rock.
All right.
We're ready to rock.
So
okay,
am I
go.
ready to set a timer?
Yep. Set that time. 1 minute. Okay, now we're going into deep cuts. This is our bonus episode stuff that we do. We do it each week. You can hear these episodes, of course, at scottsigler.com or in your podcast feed if you are subscribed on iTunes, Spotify, which you can do at scottsigler.com/subscribed. Let me record. Roll that timer, doll.
All right.
Son of a bitch.
That's all right. I can cut that out.
I literally said, no, baby, I got this. I got the thing. There's not going to be a transition sound. It's going to be no problem at all. God damn it. It's got my Gaby mic in the room tone. We'll leave that up. Okay. And, it didn't record. Hold on. Oh, it's all the way down to the end. That's what happened. And here we go.
Am I restarting the time?
Nope.
All right.
Start timer right now. Sorry, good. And scene. Hey, what's going on, y'all? Welcome to Deep Cuts, the bonus episode of the Scott Sigler Slices Fiction Podcast, where a sci-fi author and an audiobook narrator discuss all the hot topics you can't find in a mall. I'm Scott Sigler, New York Times bestselling author, known far and wide as the future dark overlord.
And I'm A.B. Sigler, known as audiobook narrator A.B. Kovacs. And on this episode of Deep Cuts, we're kind of going to talk a little bit about how a print book and an ebook becomes an audiobook. How we did Slay Maybe, and then how it becomes.
A reminder that these are bonus episodes of the Slices podcast, not part of the current story that's running in the feed. Listen if you like, but there is nothing in here that you need to keep track of.
All right, so we are going to talk about this. It's a little bit catch as catch can because we are actively, as you just saw, if you're watching live, we're actively trying to dial this in. One of the things that we're learning is I have a lower decibel voice.
Oh my God,
than Scott does. And we are in a tiny room. This room is, I'm going to say maybe 10 feet square or cubed.
Yeah, about that,
something like that. And no matter what we try, this is a new mic that I don't normally use up here. And that has changed because no matter what we do in this teeny tiny room, Scott's voice bleeds into my microphone far more than mine bleeds into his. So what we're going to do is talk about how you go from just a manuscript and a story through an audiobook. You ready?
Yes, I am ready. Let's go.
All right. So first we'll say every author probably knows this. Many readers probably know this, but I'll be very brief about this. It starts with a manuscript. You have a completed manuscript. And that is the thing that's going to become all formats of your book. And what happens first and foremost is it goes to an editor. No matter if you're recording it to tape and never putting it out in print, it goes to an editor. Once it goes to an editor, for the print book, it'll also go to a proofreader and a formatter and all that jazz. We're not going to talk about the ebook or the audiobook tonight. I'm sorry, the ebook or the print book tonight, but we are going to go from here with the audiobook. The one thing that remains the same for an ebook, audiobook, or ebook, tree book, or audiobook is that they all need a cover, and all of those covers are different files. You need different things for each one. For an audiobook, you need a square format, very high-res cover that's only the front cover of the book. All right, so once we do that...
Once we have a manuscript.
It's been edited.
Okay.
And then somebody is working on the cover art, which for us is always Scott Pond. I think the next thing that happens in our business is I look at them, well, whoever is sort of directing the manuscript, we did Slay this way. GFL is a little bit different. I look at the manuscript and kind of break it down into what I think we need. And Scott looks through the manuscript and makes what he calls audio buttons.
Audio buttons. So for what we do, if I am the narrator, and I do a lot of character voices in my books. Not everybody does character voices, but we tend to put those in the books that we do. We want to get the accent or the character voice down on a clip of audio, and then we take that and I keep that easily accessible on my iPhone. It used to be on an iPod, and I would listen to it and walk the dogs, etc. Be able to dial the character in. And the button is a phrase of either a character I have generated from scratch, or I like to do impersonations of famous actors, famous actresses, and comedians, etc., in order to take my voice into a different realm I wouldn't have done before. So that's just how I do my performances. So I will play that button, or I'll repeat that button. Like, for example, in the book Slay, we have a character named Billy, and Billy is...
Wait. I'm not sure I want you to spoil that right now because we're talking about Slay, but I do have this question covered. So a lot of you emailed us when the there's a tiny spoiler here. I won't talk about what these characters do, but there's a character called Bumberpuff in the GFL. And when Bumberpuff in the GFL came out in audiobook, I got perhaps 100 messages saying, does Scott know how much he sounds like this famous person? Now I'm going to have you do the Bumberpuff button or voice.
Okay.
Whenever you're ready. And then you guys tell me who you think this sounds like.
The Bumberpuff, I don't remember exactly who the button is, but this voice is very easy to dial in because it's like, why did you option when you were near the goal line? You should have passed out to the flat.
So if everybody in the chat room during the live stream is talking about how they love Bumberpuff, I have to say, I got probably 100 emails saying, do you guys know how much Scott sounds like William Shatner? Yes, that is the whole point. That is what we do on purpose. And then the other thing is sometimes he makes up voices completely on his own and they're not based on something else. And for this one, I'm going to ask you to tell me a Greedock voice button.
The Greedock voice button is the easiest of them all. I've been doing this for literally 15 plus years now. Like, did you hear what he said to me? And the way we do things, because that is a book with aliens, the aliens have a different prefabricated voice filter to make them sound non-human. And Steve Rickyberg, who engineers our GFL audiobooks, will apply that filter to that particular character.
Who, as you were saying the button, Steve Rickyberg, our audiobook engineer in the Facebook chat room here on the live stream, all caps wrote, did you hear what he said to me? So those things help kind of keep a character voice throughout a 150,000 word book, through a several book series, those sorts of things. What we
just to point out, first of all, hi Kyle, welcome. We'll cut that. from the final. This is not something everybody does in an audiobook. This is how we do it, how I narrate an audiobook with the voices. So the first step, of course, manuscript, get the manuscript edited. And then if there's pre-prep for character voices, we do that. Where do we go from there?
So there's that. As he's doing pre-prep for characters, which has to be the voice actor doing that work, I can't tell him I want this character. He has to be able to do it and do it through an entire book. So while he's doing that, there are several other things. If you guys are thinking of becoming audiobook narrators or you want to know more about your favorite ones, almost assuredly, what's happening on the other side of this is we're making sure that wherever that person is recording has the right soundproofing. And you can sort of see behind us and around us that this is Scott's office all the time, but it is also wildly soundproofed so that when we do this live stream, it sounds good. So when he records an audiobook, it sounds good. It's not a soundproof room, but it's pretty soundproofed. So that has to happen. Another thing that has to happen is you have to figure out if you have a director, if you have a producer, if you have an engineer, if some of those people are the same people. Once all of that is sorted out, and I am glossing over this because there's not a lot to talk about or show right now, but I have to be honest, that's not a 30-second thing. That takes a little bit of time. So once you have that, you have the character buttons, you have your plan, you have a soundproofed studio to work in, you have your plan for who's directing. Are you directing yourself? Is somebody directing you? Is the director the producer? Is the engineer the producer? Are those three different people? Once you have, or is that all you? Once you have all of that done, your goal is to get as a voice actor.
Before you get into that, let me talk. In case you're one of the audio people, pedantic audio people, there is no such thing as sound proofing. It is a general term to mean sound mitigation. You are if you are the one doing the recording, you're trying to find the quietest room you can. If you don't have a studio, or if someone's not doing an audiobook in a studio, mitigate the sound. So because of all the foam and the curtains that we have hanging up in this room, it cuts down on the room echoes, and the room echoes are what makes it sound non-professional. So sound mitigation, which casual terminology is soundproofing. Don't get crazy. Just roll with it.
I will also say, right at this moment in time, Steve Rickeberg, who's in the chat room on Facebook, and I are starting to work on some of the voice recordings that I'm doing for Death is Black. And I am actually working in our professional sound booth, which is in the garage downstairs. And I got to tell you what, I texted Steve this afternoon like, hey, I can hear the dog next door. I can hear planes overhead. I can hear Scott on the first level of our home. It's in the garage where our sound booth is. On the first level of our home, making himself lunch. And every single thing I do, literally every single time I open my mouth, I can hear mouth clicks. I can hear, you guys can hear them too, if now that I said mouth clicks. All of that stuff is not eliminatable, which is why you need a good engineer, which is why you need good form. There's all sorts of things we'll talk about if we have time to make you as the instrument, the voice instrument, a good one. But most of them, which I have not mastered any, is really, really good hydration. And then today I've been trying really hard not to close my mouth all the way when I'm talking, unless to make the sound I need to close my lips together, because every single time you close your lips, it makes a noise when you open them.
Right.
So there's a lot going on, but we're going to talk about the basics here. And then,
so that is a techniques for a narrator. Mm-hmm. So let's say we get the manuscript edited, get a cover art. If we are the ones doing it, sound treatment to mitigate sound as much as humanly possible. Preferably, if someone who writes a manuscript, this will be done by a professional voiceover narrator in a professional studio, right? Yeah. And then I forgot. Shoot, I was trying to recap the steps, and I forgot my point.
Well, and then there's other staff members that may end up being you if you are doing it all yourself. Right. You might be the writer, the narrator. You shouldn't ever be the editor. You could be the writer, the narrator, the producer, the director, and the engineer.
And are we going to get edit this? Are we getting to the question about how to treat the sound? Is that coming up?
A little bit, yeah.
Great. Okay, continue. So I forgot my point, and that makes me look like an idiot. And now, end of edit.
So once you've figured out all the roles that need to happen to make your audiobook happen, and whether or not you're doing all of those, or you have the time, ability, friends, whatever, to have other people do that, you get to recording. And at Empty Set, how we do it with Steve as our engineer, Steve prefers raw audio in, which means when I mentioned earlier today, I recorded a story for Death is Black. And when I did, I hated every single second of it. I could hear dogs barking, birds chirping. I could hear me breathing. I could hear all my mouth clicks. And I had Scott come down because I was like, this is trash. But Steve prefers for all of the filtering, all of the, I forget what they're called, presets?
The presets and plugins. Presets and plugins.
Plugins is what I was looking for. All the things you can do to manipulate the raw audio, what you're hearing right now, Steve prefers to do that himself because he's a professional. So it sounds terrible when I hear it and listen to it back to make sure that everything went to tape, but then it goes to him or whoever is editing, and the magic happens. And that is...
So you're going to edit this part.
Okay.
So you guys at home can't hear because I got too far behind. I can't play the samples for you, but we're going to put these samples in for the podcast, and I'll get those to you when you do your editing. And now you punch. Can you mute? That's my goddamn.
That's yours,
computer.
yeah.
Okay. Now you'll mute back. Well, unedit right here. So now we're going to play 2 samples for you of A's undoctored audio, which is done in a 4x4 professional sound booth, which mitigates the crap out of everything. But you guys will hear room tone, you'll hear hiss, you'll probably hear some things in the background. Then, well, first let's listen to that. And now we're back. We're going to listen to that same audio edited by Steve Rickyberg, putting on some very basic sound treatment within a digital audio workstation. In this case, probably Logic. Hear the difference in the sound for that clip you just heard, and here we go. And isn't that amazing?
So it's interesting because if you are listening to an audiobook and you're enjoying the story, a lot of this process just melts into the background. That's the beauty of an audiobook. If the story is engaging enough and the quality of the audiobook is at a minimum threshold, it can be fantastic and perfect, which is normally what happens when Steve does the GFL. It's perfect. It can also be the bare minimum. It can be no voices. It can be no transition sounds. It can be a handful of mouth clicks. One of the biggest things, which I hate to tell you all of you guys, if you're audiobook listeners, because now you'll hear it, is some folks prefer that if it's narration, you can't hear the narrator breathe. If it is a character voice, if they're getting really mad, and I have to tell you, that's allowable. But when you're just talking about prose, that isn't. And I hear that all the time now when I listen to audiobooks. So I'm going to move on a little bit because we don't have that much time. But that recording for us, for about a 150,000 word book, takes about 12 days to 2 weeks.
Okay.
And that's doing that for as long as Scott's voice will hold out, which is...
You mean each day I do it as long as my voice will hold out?
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay.
So it takes 12 to 14 days. And he, as a professional who's been doing this since 2005, he can record about 5 hours probably is the average a day. It might be a little bit less. It might be a little bit more.
For me, it depends on how I'm performing that day. Did I have the right breakfast? Did I get enough sleep? Have I had enough water the night before? Have I had enough water the morning, the day of? Mm-hmm. And for me personally, as a performer, if I'm not performing at the level that I think the junkies and the people who buy my books deserve, I tend to get angry and stressed and put a lot of tension in my voice, which grinds my voice down. So if I'm hitting everything correctly, I get a good solid 5 hours. If I'm getting pissy and mad at myself, it can be as little as 3.
And I know we're not specifically talking about voice acting, but we are talking about audiobooks, so this matters. Some of the things that can really influence your ability to narrate are things like getting angry at yourself and grousing with your whole throat. Nobody wants to hear that sort of coffee grind in your throat, that coffee grinder sort of sound, but that's exactly what one does when they're mad. I'll move a little bit away from my mic, but like when I get mad, I'm recording, what I don't want to do is, what I do a lot is that. And what I should be doing is like fiddlesticks or something that I'm not also stressing my instrument.
So what you're saying is if the narrator gets frustrated, the narrator shouldn't put a lot of glottals and throat ripping in their expressions of frustration. They should just say, gosh darn it, fiddlesticks, and then go right back at it, right?
Right. And to your point before, it's also the more he gets frustrated, if you're the narrator, they say that your voice is your instrument. If you're a singer, your voice is your instrument. And the more or your body is your instrument. And the more you get hunched up and mad about it and you close up your throat, the harder it is for you to always hit the voice buttons, the harder it is for you to do all that. So after we get the whole recording done, which takes 2 weeks, then the edit begins. And Steve, who's in the chat room on Facebook, if you're watching live, Steve does all of our GFL book edits. And those are, my goodness, the most complex things that I personally have ever seen. I'm not in a band. Scott is. I'm sure sometimes the band is a lot bigger.
So if you have stumbled upon this podcast because you're just curious about audiobook narration, the GFL is the Galactic Football League. Currently a 6-novel series. Book 7 is in the works. 6 novellas. Well over 1 million words of fiction. You can find that at scottsigler.com/library. It is state of the art for character voices that have multiple filters and sound effects in the background to make it sound like you were in a stadium. People are playing a game. The only thing more advanced than GFL is a full cast audio production.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so that's a thing that Scott records the raw audio for the Galactic Football League. And then some of the voices in those characters, and I know many of you who are watching live have heard these, some of those have, especially the Key, which is a species in the Galactic Football League, have an enormous amount of filtering and moderation and changes, actual manipulatable digital manipulation to Scott's voice that Steve is a master at. And they have worked together for ages to do that and have developed a system to do that. So what happens is Scott records, Steve edits.
Steve, the narrator records.
The narrator records.
Engineer edits.
The engineer edits. And then what happens in our company is Steve and I work together and I listen to everything he does because I'm the least intimately related to it. I didn't write it. I didn't record it. I haven't been up in its business for hours.
In this model, what is your role that we're talking about?
I think right now I'm either the proofreader or I'm the director, but I'm not really sure which. It's like I said, this is all a little bit wibbly wobbly, but I listen because it's human nature. Steve is listening to this book 10 hours a day, or 8 hours a day, all the time. So the way that you record is if I'm talking and I kind of mess up, you watch Scott do it during the live read. He'll stop. He'll do this snap so that it shows up.
What she's doing, people listening home, is when the narrator breaks, a narrator will often have a technique to let the engineer know visually what's going on. For in our world, that is we snap our fingers 2 times, which puts a giant spike a visual spike in the waveform. So a professional editor like Steve can see that ahead of time and go, oh, I see they've done 3 takes on this. Chop out the bad takes, bring the good take over. It saves a lot of time. But it's a way of communicating to the engineer, I have to redo that shit.
Yeah. And you guys who have been watching for a while have heard Steve puts together a compilation of bloopers, which I wish we would have for every single book that Scott wrote, but he doesn't edit every single one of those books. And it's wonderful because a lot of times it can be Steve said,
Go ahead and snap your fingers.
God damn it, and all this cursing, which gets on the tape, but obviously is not part of the book. So that's a little bit of joy. We probably
we're not playing that in this one.
We won't play that in this one, but you'll hear it if you continue to listen. So once all of that is done, I listen, or the director, or the proofreader, or whoever it is, listens to that entire thing to make sure Steve, who has been up to his neck in this, hasn't missed one of those repeat phrases, because that is something that would call you out in an audiobook when you hear it.
So you're saying that after you have your manuscript and you get your cover, and then you pick your narrator, you go into the studio, you do your sound mitigation, and then the narrator does the entire thing with the director helping them. Someone still has to listen to every single file to make sure nobody missed a thing. Is that right?
100%. And that is true for Find a Way for every place that you can publish this book as well. Unless you publish it on your own, someone, actual human, will listen to that for that same reason, which is why you want to get it right beforehand.
Okay.
But I do believe we have to take a commercial
we got to
break.
take a commercial break. Yeah, we got to pay some bills. We're going to do a commercial right now, maybe 2, maybe 3. We don't know. We don't know what happens. We'll be right back after this. See, that was a snap. For you people watching at home, A's going to cut this, but now you fucking know what's up. You know, like, the Jets will have their night tonight. Puerto Rican Punkos, fair fight. I don't know how to snap in West Side Story language, but now we bring back in. And we are back. Welcome.
We're going to do that again because it's me who reads us back in.
Shit, sorry.
This is how
Ready?
the sausage is made, you guys.
Ready?
And we're back. If you guys have any ideas for something you would like us to cover on Deep Cuts, please email us at info@emptyset or put it in the chat room wherever you are watching live right now, if you're watching live right now.
And if you're hearing this in the podcast feed, we live stream every Wednesday at 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern. Fans in the chat room literally ask us questions as we go. They direct what the next topic will be. It could be you. Join us.
We stream live at facebook.com/Scott Sigler, twitch.tv/Scott Sigler, and youtube.com/Scott Sigler every Wednesday. And today we are continuing our discussion about how authors and audiobook narrators interact to get and producers and directors to get an audiobook to market. So the next thing that we're going to talk about, so we've done all the edits, we've done all the things. The next thing that happens is something called punch-ins. So if Scott is supposed to say Peter Piper picked a pack of pickled peppers and says Peter Piper picked a peck of pickled peppers, and Steve says, nope, I don't like that, or it's garbled, or it's kind of mush-mouthed, or whatever, or whoever is listening as a proofer says like, yeah, that sounds kind of weird, I don't like that. You mark it, you say where it is in the timeline. It's in chapter 3 at 27 minutes, 37 seconds. And Scott has to go in and repunch that line. And then he actually goes right back to the recording system that he used, does those lines, sends those lines like individual lines. I mean, he might send 30 at a time, but they're not edited into Steve, and Steve has to insert them back into the story where they go.
This is a very important point. I'm glad you mapped all this out, because when you hear an audiobook, you usually have no idea when the narrator has blown a take and didn't catch it, and the producer didn't catch it. It goes to the proofreader, and sometimes the proofreader is the actual author, but somebody comes back and goes, you got this wrong. You pronounced this word incorrectly. You got this dialect wrong. You literally missed 2 sentences of the book, which actually happens. And then the narrator has to go back into the booth, hopefully the exact same environment, and re-record that particular line, which the engineer then has to surgically insert. So if you are audiobook fans, the next time you're listening to an audiobook and you hear the narrator's voice sounds like this, and then the narrator's voice sounds like this, that was a punch-in where they had to record in a different environment. And hopefully it doesn't take you out of the story, but it can. That is what you just heard.
Right. And in the chat room, in the live stream that we're doing, if you guys are listening on podcast, you might not hear this, or you might not see this, but Chris Grohl in the Facebook chat room said, I can pick out a punch-in almost 100% of the time. Does Steve drop them in pre-mastering? Because I guess he doesn't hear Steve's that much. And I am exactly the same. I'm listening to audiobooks from other publishers. I can hear that they recorded most of the book in a recording studio, and then they had to do a punch-in in a closet in a hotel in Germany. Yeah. And it totally is like, this is lush and wonderful, and I'm so glad you're here. I'm really glad you're here. I am so glad you're here. But absolutely 100%, this is why we love Steve and why we work with Steve. He is so particular about that and so good at kind of doing that he will even say like, yep, I know you did this punch-in. You gave it to me already as a retake. I need another retake. That was kind of terrible. And he'll do that. And that's the right answer because it gives us, the audiobook listeners, the best product.
Right. What's next?
What's next after we do all of that is the entire book comes together. Steve is happy with it. I am happy with it. Scott doesn't listen at this point.
I try. Sometimes an author gets to listen to a bit, or sometimes an audiobook narrator gets to listen, but not always.
Yeah, not always. And when that happens, once the engineer is entirely happy with it or ready to go, like send it out into the big wide world, and whoever else is on the other side, the director, the proofer, the producer, whatever that is, they're ready to do that. Then there's a mastering sequence. And I will be honest, I know very little about how that sausage is made, but Steve and Scott know more about that. But what happens once all the files are ready to be mastered, can you talk about?
I can. And actually, I did mastering for our most recent audiobook, Slay Book 1, and I did not do a good job on the mastering. And I'm not happy with the way the thing sounds, but it's perfectly passable. So things get mastered, and then you've got your pristine finished files in the format that Audible wants. And then what happens?
So to give a little more spice on that, wherever you're uploading it, to iTunes, to Audible, to wherever, they will have minimum threshold requirements that they will accept for your audio.
That's right.
And most of the time, it's a specific kilobytes per second download.
Correct.
It's the file has to be fat enough or big enough. The cover art has to be enough pixels so that no matter where you're looking at it, it looks good. And all of that, I believe, we mostly upload to ACX if it's our own books, which is the Audible sort of self-publishing for audiobooks.
ACX stands for Audible Exchange.
Audible Creators Exchange.
Audible Creators Exchange. That is a method by which indie authors and small publishers can upload their audiobooks to Audible directly.
Yeah. And I believe that there are algorithmic checks. Like they will just send some of your audio through an automatic digital process. And if your noise floor if there's too much noise in general in the room, which sometimes happens, if there's too many clicks, if the sound quality shifts throughout the chapters, things like that, it will just reject it outright, and you have to go back, figure out what you did wrong. This is another thing that a really, really good engineer like we have does in a processized way so that it's just everyone matches and he's got a way to double check it and we have a way to hear that and it's all good. So once all that happens, you upload it to whatever outlet that you're going to do. Like I said, we normally use the Audible Creators Exchange, and then you cross your fingers and wait and barely breathe. Barely breathe for like 2 weeks.
It is literally, is it like waiting to see who the prom queen is? We have submitted, it's like waiting to find out whether you got the job. We did all this fucking work.
It's more like you're waiting, if you're ever an actor, it's like you're waiting to get the part or you're waiting to see who won the Oscar or something like that.
You did your performance. You nailed it. Your team excelled at the highest level. You submit it to the powers that be, and then you have to wait. Yeah,
and you wait kind of with clenched teeth and hands and fists and stuff like that, and you hope for the best. So it is helpful and wonderful to develop a team, which we have done, where everybody kind of knows their role. And when the machine is working well, the narrator knows their job, the writer knows their job, the director knows their job, the engineer knows their job, and they kind of work in concert together. And that takes a while. The reason that our engineer, Steve, works with us is that I, a billion years ago, knowing nothing about audio, attempted to do an audiobook edit. And it's doable. I could figure it out, but I was so terrible at it that I was grousing about it when we were together. And Steve, who is our engineer, was like, that is my job. And that was it. It was like, cool, a professional who has been educated to do this, please do this for me. And even so, that was in, I believe, 2011, maybe a little bit earlier, maybe a tiny bit later. But back then, the difference was so profound. And now today, we're a wildly better team than we were back in 2012.
Correct.
Because you have to do that together. You have to grow together. And that's the biggest thing. Because every part of an audiobook getting from manuscript to market touches human beings. And human beings are fallible. And so you have to kind of grow together and mold together and figure itself out together. But I'm really proud of the work that we do. And I feel like this is a really good process for anybody who's an indie, who would do this by themselves.
So we, first of all, you have to have a manuscript, which is edited. Then you need to understand the formats and the tolerances and parameters for how to do an audiobook, as in what the marketplace needs the file to be like. You need to have a proper cover. Then you need to pick your proper narrator, which if you're an indie author listening to this, acx.com is your place, because you can go find professional audiobook narrators who have all the equipment. They can do all of this work for you, and you can set up a revenue share, which is a whole different thing, so you don't have to pay outright for it. Once you get your narrator has to do the job in a properly sound-treated environment, so it sounds professional. Then when you go through that whole process, those recorded files have to be, number one, edited, which means an editor has to go through and chop out the bad takes and everything.
Mm-hmm.
And then when the audio files are completed, which is its own long process, which takes artistry unto itself, then those files have to be proofed by someone who is going to be a fresh set of ears and listen to the whole production.
And I want to just point out that is a second edit. If you edit, the first thing you do is edit the manuscript by itself, no voices. Then you go the whole thing again. And that edit includes making sure that the narrator is actually telling the story the writer told and not improving or ad-libbing or adding words or shortening like I am not to I'm not. And so it's 2 whole edits.
So now you've gone through, somebody listens to everything. First, the engineer goes back to the narrator and says, hey, you missed these lines, makes a whole list. The narrator has to go back and redo this work. The engineer then inserts those redone bits into the work and creates finished files. Finished files then, as we were talking, go to a fresh set of ears, or the author or the director, someone who's going to listen and has the ability to hear the whole thing and say, yes, this is what I want. Then the files have to be exported at the correct bit rate, a lot of different parameters based on where you are submitting them. Then those finished files, get them in the right format, have to be reviewed by the retailer, which most of the times is Audible, which is acx.com. Then they will come back and either say, hey, redo these, you got this wrong, or they will say, goody gumdrops, ready to go, you did everything right. Only then, with all of those steps, does the book get to be on sale and people buy it. Is that right?
It is. And so that is kind of the life cycle of getting a manuscript from an author into an audiobook, purchasable variety of audiobook. But there are a handful of tiny little things, and I won't keep you guys too long. We've been around, the story was a little long, but a few of the things that we haven't mentioned but are absolutely part of how the sausage gets made is you could be recording for 3 days in a row, and then you come back to the exact same setup that you haven't done anything to at all, and your microphone doesn't work, or one of the cables has started to frizz, or it's now 10 more degrees that day in your hometown. So going into your soundproofed room is impossible because you're pouring sweat and having trouble.
And it can sound different depending on the day.
100%.
Yep.
And there are some little kind of bloopers, I'll call them, that can happen along the way. Sometimes, like I said, it's now June in San Diego, and I was recording in our 4x4 professional sound booth today, and it just got hotter and hotter and hotter. And you can either choose to sweat and try not to have that come into your sound, or there have been cases where I think you've been in the booth and you're like, okay, I need a minute, and he takes off his shirt or something to be cooler, which, of course, he's in there alone. You can't really see that. But all of those things, I think, are things that happen along the way. And that happens in every job, but these are some of the things that might happen in this job.
Okay. Yeah. So there's many steps involved in taking once the manuscript is done, turning it into an audiobook, getting it into the marketplace, and then finally your audiobook is for sale. So those of you every audiobook you've ever listened to has gone through these steps and or more steps before it ever hits your ears. It's an enormous amount of work. It's an enormous amount of organization.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you next buy your next audiobook from Audible, appreciate that shit. It's a lot of work. It is an entire art form to make an audiobook that is completely separate from the writing of the book in the first place, which is its own art form.
Right. And I, as a listener of audiobooks and also as a creator of audiobooks, one of the things that surprises me the most is every once in a while I will listen to a series or a book or a story where I think that one of the books is subpar. I think that they had a different studio. I think that they had a different narrator. I think things like that happened. And that changes my enjoyment of the series. And, you know, you guys all know this. If you've listened to Scott for a long time, we have a series where we have two series where the narrators have changed over time. And one of the things about that is it feels very normal as a consumer, as a customer, to be like, oh, I didn't really like that. Can you? We get often, we get people who want Scott to read Scott's own stories because that's how it started. Scott narrated all of his beginning audiobooks because he had the time to do that, and he doesn't anymore. And we frequently get emails saying, I prefer Scott reading the audiobooks. But what that means is if Scott reads all of his own audiobooks, he can write a book, which takes 3 to 6 months. Then he can spend a month or two recording it where he's not writing something else.
Mm-hmm.
And I get it as a consumer. I do it as a consumer. I don't get that. I don't care about it because it feels like it took me 1 second to buy an audiobook, an ebook, or a tree book. But it takes the time it takes to create that, especially the audiobook, is insanely different.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you guys have favorite series that don't always get an audiobook, that might be why.
And if you get a favorite series that has a narrator change in the middle, that does happen. Don't be upset. But the final thing I will say about this is, before we close out, sometimes audiobooks can seem expensive if you buy them a la carte. For example, I think Slay, book 1, is what, $20+ right now? If you use an Audible credit, it costs you nothing. You don't even think about it. But it takes a lot of work, a multiple staff, a laborious process to create an audio book. I will say, for the amount of labor that goes into writing a novel, someone editing a novel multiple times, someone recording a novel, someone engineering a novel, producing a novel, then going back through and doing the punch-ins in a novel, getting everything right, finally getting it submitted, getting it approved, uploaded where you can get an Audible. It is a huge amount of work. It is pennies on the dollar for the amount of work that goes into it, for the entertainment that you get from it.
Yeah, we're almost done, but I do want to bring up this one anecdote because a lot of you will have recognized this. During the pandemic, we put out Mount Fitzroy, which was the sequel, the duology to Earthcore. Earthcore came out the first time in 2005. It has been around forever. We finally put out Mount Fitzroy. To get the Mount Fitzroy story told, that is the biggest book we have ever produced. It is 888 pages long. To do the print book, there is physically one printer on Earth that can print that book in one book form. The other option was to break it into 2 different physical books. That print book cost $30.
Mm-hmm.
And we got a lot of people complaining, like, $30 for a paperback? And I would write back and say, hey, it's the same length as 2 whole paperbacks. And they got that. But they don't get it in audio, because audio, you don't have a thing to hold on to. You don't see that book is twice as big as every other paperback on your shelf. You don't get any of that. So to that point, it's interesting because the work it takes to make that audiobook is wildly bigger.
It's massively bigger.
Wildly bigger than the amount of work it takes to make that giant, giant paperback. But more people complain about the audiobook because it feels like they get like a digital ebook might be less expensive because there's no product and it's a thin file. Audiobook files are huge, but they don't quite see that. It's a pretty common thing for people to think an audiobook should be cheap and easy to do, and therefore shouldn't cost too much more money than a paperback or whatever, but it just does.
That is it for this episode of Deep Cuts. Oh, shit. Do we have any? We didn't even ask for topics for next week.
Well, actually...
Let's take a quick break. Go. Not people. We're going to edit this. People at home, what do you hear about next week?
Well, I think so next week we're going to be in...
That's just us. That's not Rob, though. We're not... I thought about that.
But we already talked about this, and it was going to be your folks.
Oh, snap.
So you want to go back in and talk about this?
No.
Okay.
First of all, because you guys are watching live, you get all of the skinny, the behind-the-scenes shit that won't make the final cut. We're going to have Coach Sigler tell stories about football that do not involve politics at all. And he will be lectured on, we are not discussing your view on America now versus America then. We're going to be talking about fucking football, dude, which you are a master craftsman at. So we will be back next week. And now we're ready to punch in. We will be back next week. And you guys, we have a treat for you. My father, Coach Irv Sigler, 2-time state champion football coach in Michigan, a career of helping young people be better through sport and through education, an absolute bastion of the community. We're going to be asking him to tell entertaining stories about football that he will get to choose, and you will see how that influenced the Galactic Football League story.
Okay, so in that case, I think we're done for tonight. Thank you guys so much for being patient and joining us the whole time. Thank you for being patient with our ins and outs. It's a perfect episode to talk about how the sausage is made and then do some cuts along the way. And I think you have to tell them about flowers. That they all...
Okay, stopped recording.
Okay.
We're guys, work with us. We're still trying to get used to the system. This is only episode 6. So we sound out the episode and then we hit stop in the recording, which you edit, which edits the recording. And then we blab with all you guys about what's coming up next week.
Yeah. So
I don't know, do we get a good closing?
Well, so you jumped my line to talk about. Yeah, that's what. And so I was like, you say, thanks for joining us, and you all smell a lot like flowers.
I did because I went into that thing.
Because you jumped, yeah.
There we go. Thanks for joining us on Deep Cuts, the bonus episodes of the Scott Sigler Slices podcast. We record live every Wednesday at 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern. You can join us at scottsigler.com. You can join us at facebook.com/ScottSigler, youtube.com/ScottSigler, or twitch.tv/ScottSigler. You all smell an awful lot like flowers.
Bye. And now we're done. We're getting better at it. This is like only our 6th one.
Good luck editing this piece of shit, babe. Good fucking luck. I have served her up a shit sandwich. Some of it's good. No, a lot of it's good, but we have a system that we haven't quite figured out yet.
Yeah, we're developing a system because and because we're traveling coming up soon, the editing of all of this has to be right away. So anyhow, for you guys who are still watching and listening, we're not recording anymore, so this won't be in the podcast. We are going to be remote for the next couple of weeks.
Hopefully it works. We'll see.
Hopefully it works.
Know.
But the plan will continue. The live story will just be the live story like you saw this week. It'll be that way for the next 2 weeks. And the deep cuts will also be live like you just saw. It may not be me. It might be, as we talked about next week, it is probably going to be Scott and his dad. Same thing for about a half an hour. It's probably going to be a little more freeform than this one is. And then the week after, which is a huge joy and I'm very excited about, and you should all plan, if you don't always join, plan for this. It'll be Scott and Rob Otto live together like this.
Yeah, it's going to be great.
In person, because they will be on their writing retreat where they do this stuff that we love so much.
There won't be fancy camera switching. It's going to be 3 people mashed into a tiny frame, and you guys will have to enjoy it. But we hope that you join us. It should be great. And I think that about does it for tonight, baby.
I think it does. Thank you guys so much for staying with us this long. We love you.
And now we switch back to the pretty cam, which is the cam with me on it. And that is it. You all smell an awful lot like flowers. Good